the organizers of this event, Professor Andrei Gorohov. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this prestigious international conference on science diplomacy. And the title of my presentation is Prospects of Science Diplomacy. In the introductions, science diplomacy has gained prominence as a strategy in science policy and foreign policy. Organizations have given it much importance, while organizations like Royal Society and UNESCO have also discussed its potential. As a result, in the last decade or so, there has been a spurt in literature and activities related to scientific diplomacy. But while the term scientific diplomacy might have become prominent recently, it has been practiced in one form or another for many decades. Europe has a long tradition in science diplomacy, though it may not always have been labeled as such in the past. Prominent examples of institutions established in Europe with both a scientific and a science diplomacy in motivation include the European Organization for Nuclear Research, that is CERN, established in 1954, and European Commission's Joint Research Center, JRC, established in 1957. The Abdus Salam International Center for Theoretical Physics, ICTP, established in 1964, and the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA, established in 1972. To name but a few, one of the most recent examples is the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, ITER, being built in southern France. The European Union also provided significant funding to the establishment of the Synchrotron Light for Experimental Science and Applications in the Middle East, that is called CSEN, which is a joint undertaking of Israel, the Palestinian territories, Egypt, Jordan, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, and Cyprus. International relationships that can be framed under science diplomacy have been taking place since the beginning of human civilization. From the exchange of knowledge and scientific tokens in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece in the Western world to the Silk Road, international treaties for nuclear disarmament and scientific cooperation between the United States and the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, during the Cold War can also fall under this broad category. Other international treaties for the governance and scientific cooperation in ungoverned spaces such as Antarctica, oceans, or even space may be understood as science diplomacy too. Another example of science diplomacy is the establishment of large research infrastructures that require the scientific cooperation of a number of countries that had been opponents in the past, such is the case of CERN in Switzerland and CSEM in the Middle East. Now, coming to the demonstration effect, the science and technology community in the United States and elsewhere has by and large welcomed the change brought about by the United States voters and looks forward to greater science and evidence-based policy making and governance. The science and technology relationship between the United States, European Union, and China is going through a stressful period. China has embarked on a drive to strengthen its technological self-reliance and is making increased efforts in critical basic and applied science sectors. Science diplomacy is coming to the fore as a formidable dimension of interstate power relations. As the challenges of the world increasingly transcends borders, so too have researchers and innovators forged international coalitions to resolve global pathologies. In doing so, new channels of influence and opportunities have opened for states alongside the traditional modes of foreign diplomacy. Understanding how these channels influence global socio-economic outcomes is thereby crucial for scholars interested in the still ambiguous structure and processes of global governance. As research partnerships spanning borders become prominent in their social and economic potential, they have generated a distinct and new transnational political dynamic. We contend this dynamic is discernible in international research networks operating as mechanisms through which knowledge organizations and scientific scientific communities become entwined with the governance ambitions of international organizations and the foreign policy concerns of governments. We've already seen, for example, how developed countries can leverage innovation as a form of developmental aid using science to eradicate preventable disease, develop hardy cash crops, or share irrigation and water purification technologies. On this basis, and tallying with a discourse on other concepts such as grand societal challenges, actors called upon others to develop responses to exigent problems of cross-border reach. But science diplomacy goes beyond that calling. Actors invoked that dedicated international collaborations should help nurture the international relations between actors even to the point of alleviation their tensions. Moreover, its proponents have promised either to accompany or to reform traditional diplomacy, encouraging official diplomatic actors to adopt adapt to a style of communication cultivated within the science system or to integrate academic researchers as part of diplomatic missions to win foreign societal favor by calling upon common scientific values and promoting common interests, as well as to incorporate scientific expertise whenever necessary in complex scenarios. While these calls may well suggest an increase of scientific relevance to international relations, the discourse on science diplomacy equally stresses the importance of diplomatic work as an enabler, if not even a necessary condition of cross-border science collaborations. When we talk about collaborations and inclusions, as the world emerged from the ravages of the war, the idea of science diplomacy began to gain traction. In August 1955, the United Nations International Conference on the Peaceful Use of Atomic Energy, known as Atoms for Peace, was held in Geneva, attended by a delegation from the USSR that included a number of scientists. It was the first time that a large delegation of Soviet scientists working in particle physics took part in a scientific conference in the West. The symposium offered the opportunity for many to make personal contacts. Several Soviet physicists who attended went on to fill important roles in their country, and their work began to be translated into English and published in the West. Even though the Cold War continued to intensify, scientific cooperation projects were able to demonstrate the capacity of scientific cooperation to forge links between countries and colleagues beyond political or religious considerations. 10 years after the birth of CERN, and UNESCO supported the creation of another venture that would provide a rare line of communication between scientists from the East and the West. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, global environmental problems had taken center stage. The post-war economic boom had brought an endless appetite for new non-renewable resources, higher levels of pollution, and potential loss of environmental habitats. In 1971, some 4,000 scientists from around the world warned the United Nations Secretary General in the Manton Message that there were already far too many people on Earth in proportion to the available resources. In the present day, there are a number of challenges for all humankind, like climate change and the state of our ecosystems. But there are also challenges that are science and technology driven, such as digitalization or artificial intelligence. And many of those are spaces in which all of our research institutions are operating. So we could share our perspectives on how to communicate with policymakers and how to get messages across. When we talk about capacity building, in an era of rapid scientific advancements and global challenges, building robust capacity in science diplomacy has become crucial. Science diplomacy serves as a bridge between the scientific community and diplomatic entities, promoting a deeper understanding and encouraging collaboration and mutual respect. Enhanced dialogue and exchange can lead to better informed policy decisions and a greater appreciation of the role science plays in addressing global issues. The primary goal of capacity building in science diplomacy is to develop and enhance the tools necessary for effective practice. This requires continuous research to refine existing tools and create new methodologies that better support diplomatic efforts. Raising awareness about the significance of science diplomacy is another key aspect of capacity building. By showcasing successful examples and the impact of science diplomacy, its visibility can be elevated on the global stage, attracting more stakeholders to invest in and support these initiatives. Effective capacity building efforts must also innovate and develop new approaches where needed, identifying gaps in current frameworks and addressing emerging challenges to keep science diplomacy relevant and capable of tackling future issues. Key trends shaping science diplomacy include global challenges such as climate change and public health, the rise of new technologies like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and a strategic emphasis on aligning scientific endeavors with policy goals such as technological sovereignty and research security. Additionally, the role of civil society is expanding, emphasizing the need for inclusive practices that consider diverse perspectives. Furthermore, the organized scientific diaspora plays an important role in shaping science diplomacy on a global scale. Coming to the geopolitical tensions, the world of science is rapidly changing as geopolitical tensions intensify. The Russia Ukraine war, which led the West to freeze economic relations and cutting fundings for Russian organizations involved in hundreds of projects, impacting various international scientific projects, such as work addressing climate change in the Arctic. In the Israel-Palestine context, scientists encounter a complex socio-political environment where taking sides or expressing views can have professional consequences that restrict academic freedom and research collaboration. As conflicts and tensions surge, science and technology organizations are increasingly reducing their openness to the world, risking a trend towards scientific protectionism. Such protectionism claims that technological sovereignty aligns with state interests, restricts collaborations with scientists from autocratic regimes, limits open science and data sharing to protect national competitive advantage, and results in scientific sanctions. We are in an era of disruption. The geopolitical context is increasingly adversarial, power is more widely distributed, and relationships among leading powers have become more competitive. The global scientific and technological landscape is being transformed and has made science and technology even more critical to national governments for economic growth and international competitiveness. Intertwined with this disruption are environmental challenges, including climate change and biodiversity loss, that continue to pose a significant threat to life on our planet. In this time of change and uncertainty, we need a framework on the practice of science diplomacy that recognizes the world for what it is, that can be used as a tool for state and non-state actors, and that enables practitioners, from diplomats to industrial leaders, to address the challenges and even seize the opportunities of a disrupted world. In the conclusion, international science collaborations hold forth much promise with respect to science for diplomacy. However, scientists, institutions, and funding agencies need to more explicitly connect with resources readily available from international programs, offices, and the diplomatic community to ensure conscious attention to the academic biases and asymmetries. Scientists associate their international collaborations with the goals of diplomacy, although in a more informal and unintentional way. More direct messaging and education by funding agencies and other scientific institutions could help collaborating scientists engage more intentionally in science for diplomacy. Despite the complexities and challenges presented by the current geopolitical landscape, the imperative for sustained and open scientific collaboration remains paramount. As the world grapples with a daunting array of challenges, the need for a concerted science-led approach is more crucial than ever. The global community must recognize the long-term benefits of investing in science diplomacy for the global good, even as conflicts proliferate. This can and should be done not only as a means to advance national interests, but more importantly, as a strategic tool to foster international cooperation, peace, and the collective well-being of humanity. We are entering an era when the fields of science and diplomacy have changed in fundamental ways. The world is facing significant challenges, and the geopolitical context is becoming increasingly fragmented, contested, and unstable. Science diplomacy is needed more than ever, as is a renewed framework to ensure its continued utility. Above all else, science diplomacy is a practical activity in an imperfect world. Bearing it in complex theoretical frameworks is of no value. The key attributes for science participants in diplomatic processes are a depth and breadth of scientific expertise backed by strong supporting networks, excellent communication skills, understanding of government processes, and respect for the boundaries between scientific evidence and policy making. Thank you very much for listening to my presentations. Большое спасибо за то, что вы слушали мою презентацию.